Okay, picture this. A giant of innovation, maybe the giant, brought almost to ruin. It's 1997 and Apple is just bleeding money. Over $1 billion in losses that year.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine now. Their market value had tanked like 80% in 5 years.
Investors were jumping ship. Some people were saying there were, 90 days from being totally broke?
90 days from bankruptcy. And their computers, people weren't buying them. They were literally gathering dust on store shelves. Executives were leaving in droves.
It really felt like this company that wanted to, put a dent in the universe was about to just vanish, become a footnote.
Absolutely. They were drowning in this sea of confusing products. Windows was totally dominant. The idea that Apple could bounce back, let alone change the world again, it seemed, impossible.
And yet, something incredible happens. A comeback story for the ages. The guy who started it all, who got famously kicked out.
Steve Jobs. He returned.
Exactly. And orchestrates maybe the greatest corporate turnaround we've ever seen. So, that's our deep dive today, Steve Jobs and Apple's comeback.
And it's more than just, a tech story. It's about this incredibly complex guy, his journey, his difficult personality sometimes, but also his absolute obsession with perfection.
How all that didn't just save Apple, but reshaped everything. Phones, music, computers, our daily lives.
We're going to dig into the key moments, the surprising turns that made it all happen.
So let's start at the beginning. His origins are pretty unconventional, right? Born in San Francisco, 1955.
Yeah, February 24th. His birth parents were young, unwed. Back then, the social pressure was immense, so they put him up for adoption. Paul and Clara Jobs adopted him.
And that move to Mountain View in 61, that put him right in the middle of everything.
Smack bang in the heart of what was becoming Silicon Valley. He literally grew up breathing that air, surrounded by electronics, engineers. The future, basically.
And his adoptive dad, Paul, he wasn't just any dad, machinist. Built him a workbench.
Yeah, Paul Jobs was crucial. He fixed cars, loved mechanics, and he passed that on. He taught Steve about craftsmanship, meticulous detail.
And that key idea that even the parts you can't see have to be beautiful.
Exactly. That became fundamental to Steve's whole design philosophy later on. The inside matters as much as the outside.
But it wasn't smooth sailing in school, was it? He called himself a little terror.
Oh, definitely not. Resisted authority, played pranks, struggled to fit in. Traditional classrooms just weren't his thing.
Until that fourth grade teacher, Imogene Hill, what was the story? She bribed him.
Kind of. Offered him $5 to finish a workbook. And it worked. He said she ignited his passion for learning, learned more that year than any other. They even wanted him to skip 2 grades.
Wow. His parents let him skip 1, though.
Right. But then came middle school, Crittenden. He got bullied pretty badly.
And his reaction, classic Jobs apparently, gave his parents an ultimatum.
Yep, move schools or he'd drop out. So they dug into their savings, bought a house on Christ Drive in Los Altos in 67. That house, that garage, that's where it all starts later.
And that's where he meets key people like Bill Fernandez.
At Cupertino Junior High, yeah. Fernandez thought he was odd, but introduced him to Steve Wozniak. The other Steve. The technical genius.
The partnership begins, but Jobs was kind of a loner too, right? Swimming, hanging out at HP.
Yeah, not into team sports, loved competitive swimming, spent a lot of time at a neighbor's Hewlett-Packard workshop. Then the HP Explorer Club. He saw his first computer there at 12.
And knew instantly.
That's what he said. Knew he wanted to work with him.
And that famous story about calling Bill Hewlett as a high school kid.
Just cold called the president of HP, asking for parts for a school project.
Yeah.
Hewlett was so impressed he gave him the parts in a summer job.
To it, what, sweeping floors?
Putting in screws, basically. But Jobs said he was in heaven. That boldness, that audacity, you see it right there, early on.
Then came the teenage years, the early 70s. A lot changed for him then.
Big time. He started experimenting, got stoned, discovered Shakespeare, Dylan Thomas, had these 2 groups of friends, the techie engineering types like Woz.
And the artsy literary crowd like Chris Ann Brennan, his girlfriend.
Exactly. But he never quite fit in either camp. Always the outsider. Described as kind of a brain and kind of a hippie, but really, just an individual.
Which made college choices interesting. His parents saved up, expected maybe Berkeley.
But no. He insisted on Reed College in Oregon. Expensive, private, known for being artistic, free-spirited, but also really rigorous.
Yep.
Gave him another ultimatum.
And they relented as usual.
Yep. But then he gets there, studies physics and philosophy, and drops out of the required classes almost immediately.
But stays around, auditing classes.
The ones he liked, And this is crucial.
Yeah.
He audited a calligraphy class, just one class.
Calligraphy, how does that connect?
He said later it was absolutely pivotal. Without that class, the Mac wouldn't have had its beautiful typography, the multiple fonts, proportionally spaced fonts. It was about aesthetics, art meeting technology.
Wow. That deep appreciation for design, even in fonts, came from dropping in on a class after dropping out.
It really shows his thinking. Design wasn't just surface level, it was fundamental. During this time, he was living super rough too.
Sleeping on floors, returning Coke bottles.
Eating free meals at the Hare Krishna temple. A real period of searching, exploring.
And then came the Blue Box adventure with Wozniak.
Ah yes, 1972. Woz designs this thing to make free, long-distance calls. Illegal, of course.
And Jobs sees an opportunity.
A business.
Yep.
They apparently made around $6,000 selling these things before almost getting caught. Jobs later said, if not for the blue boxes, there would have been no Apple.
Why? What did it teach them?
He thought it showed they could take on huge companies, like the phone company, and beat them, thinking differently.
Then the trip to India in 73, a spiritual quest.
Yeah, 7 months. Seeking enlightenment, looking for a guru, came back with a shaved head wearing Indian clothes.
And this idea about intuition.
He became convinced that intuition was more powerful than intellect. He saw it in Indian villagers, said it had a big impact on my work, trusting his gut.
He also experimented with LSD around this time.
Called it a profound experience. Said it reinforced his desire to create great things, put things back into the stream of history, not just make money.
Came back, lived in his parents' shed, practiced Zen Buddhism, really embracing that counterculture identity.
Felt you couldn't understand his thinking unless you had those roots. Then he lands back at Atari.
Right. As a technician, the founder apparently said he was difficult but valuable.
Sums him up, maybe. Atari assigns him the breakout game board design. He brings in Woz.
And makes that infamous deal, $100 for every chip Wozniak eliminated.
Woz works magic. Cuts the chips down from 96 to 46. An incredible feat.
But Jobs wasn't entirely truthful about the payout.
No. Atari paid $5,000. Jobs told Wozniak they only got $700 and gave Woz just $350.
Ouch. Wozniak found out years later from a book and said he cried.
Yeah, shows that. Complicated, sometimes ruthless side of Jobs, even early on.
Then the Homebrew Computer Club meetings in 75. That was the final catalyst.
Seems like it. Woz saw the MIT's Altair Kick computer there, got inspired, and the next step was Apple.
1976. Woz builds the Apple iBoard. Jobs says, let's sell it.
And Apple Computer is born April 1st, 1976. In the Jobs family home in Los Altos.
The garage gets all the fame, but a lot happened elsewhere too, right?
Yeah, Woz did a lot of the core work in his own bedroom. The garage was more assembly, storage. The myth is potent, though.
And that third founder, Ronald Wayne, sold his 10% stake almost immediately.
12 days later.
Yeah.
For $800. Missed out on billions. Just incredible. Or incredibly unlucky.
But Jobs and Wozniak, that was the magic combo.
Perfect complementarity, as people say. Was the engineer, Jobs the visionary, the marketer, the driver.
They scraped together funding, selling a VW bus, a calculator.
It was about $1,300. The Apple I sold as a kit for that weird price, $666.66.
Humble beginnings.
But then came the Apple II in 77. That was the game changer.
Totally. This was a complete computer for regular people, not just hobbyists. Reassembled.
And Jobs insisted on that plastic case, right? No wood.
That design focus again, sleek, modern. It had color graphics, a keyboard connected to your TV, expandable too. And VisiCalc, the spreadsheet program, the first killer app.
Exactly. That showed people why they needed a personal computer. It drove sales like crazy.
And the growth was just insane.
Explosive is the word. $775,000 revenue in 77 to $118 million by 1980. That's what, 533% annual growth?
The IPO in 1980 made hundreds of millionaires overnight.
Biggest IPO since Ford. Jobs was suddenly worth millions. $250 million by age 25. Youngest self-made guy on the Forbes list.
But his personal life was getting messy again around then. Chrisanne Brennan came back.
Yeah, they reconnected briefly after she returned from India. But his focus was Apple, Apple, Apple. The relationship frayed.
And then she got pregnant in 77.
Jobs' reaction wasn't great, according to her. He denied it was his, spread rumors he was infertile.
Even though he was there when Lisa was born in 78, helped name her.
Yeah. He was 23, same age his birth parents were. But he publicly denied paternity for years. The Apple Lisa computer, though, developed right around then.
He later admitted it was named for her.
Obviously, he told his biographer, it adds another layer to his complexity.
So Apple II is a huge hit, But then comes the Apple III in 1980, and that was less successful.
A big flop, actually. Designed for business, but Jobs insisted, no cooling fan. He thought the chassis could handle the heat.
It couldn't.
Not even close. They overheated, chips popped out. Apple literally told customers to lift the machine up and drop it to reseat the chips.
You cannot be serious. Drop the computer.
That was the official advice. Thousands had to be recalled. Huge embarrassment damaged their reputation. Shows how his design obsession could sometimes backfire badly.
Meanwhile, the competition is heating up. IBM enters the PC market in 81.
Yep. Apple's response was that cheeky, welcome IBM. Seriously, add cocky maybe.
Bill Gates said they didn't seem worried at first.
Took them a year to realize the threat. By 83, the IBM PC was outselling the Apple II. The board started getting nervous, told Jobs he needed
adult supervision.
Right. Enter John Scully from Pepsi, after Jobs rejected like 20 other candidates.
With that legendary pitch. Sell sugared water for the rest of your life or change the world.
Who could resist that? Scully joined in 83, brought marketing muscle.
While this is happening, Apple's already working on the next big thing, based on tech they saw at Xerox PRRC.
Exactly. It's the graphical user interface, the mouse, icons. The Lisa computer was first, but then came the Macintosh project, which Jobs eventually took over.
The Mac, launched January 24th, 1984, aimed at the masses. User-friendly, revolutionary.
But a huge gamble, so much hype, and Jobs knew the launch needed something spectacular.
The 1984 Super Bowl ad, directed by Ridley Scott.
Iconic. Apple versus IBM as Big Brother. This woman smashes the screen. Why 1984 won't be like 1984. Just blew people's minds. Incredible marketing.
But the Mac itself had issues.
Initial reviews were mixed. Some called it a toy. Not enough software initially. And
higher than Jobs wanted, $2,495.
Scully pushed for the higher price for profit margins. It kind of undermined the computer for the rest of us idea. Sales started strong, but then slowed down.
And the tension between Jobs and Scully just kept building. Different styles.
Totally different. Scully hated how Jobs treated people. They clashed over pricing, strategy. Mac sales weren't meeting expectations. Lisa was dead. The board sided with Scully.
Things came to a head in March 85. Scully removes Jobs from the Mac team.
Jobs apparently tried to stage a coup while Scully was supposed to be away.
But Scully found out, confronted him.
In front of the board, made them choose. They chose Scully.
And Jobs is out, resigned September 85, took key people with him.
Started XT Computer, the beginning of the wilderness years.
NextT, technologically brilliant, right, object-oriented software, the Mach kernel.
Way ahead of its time. But the price tag, $9,999 for the first NextT Cube. Just way too expensive, especially for the education market they were targeting.
So they stopped making hardware in 93, became a software company.
Yep, NextT step. And that software, that's the hidden gem. It becomes the foundation for the future Mac OS and iOS. So those years weren't wasted, not at all. Was said Jobs was really maturing during this time.
And then there was Pixar. He bought Lucasfilm's computer graphics division in 86.
For $10 million, renamed it Pixar. And here, his management style seemed different.
So how so?
He learned to trust the creatives. Like John Lasseter, his mantra was simple, make it great. He gave them space, prioritized quality over roughing things.
Which led to Toy Story in 95, huge hit.
Massive. Changed animation forever. Jobs took Pixar public in 96, became a billionaire overnight from his stake. Pixar taught him so much about storytelling, emotional connection, things he'd bring back to Apple.
His personal life was also changing significantly during this exile, reconciliation with Lisa.
Yes. He apologized to her and Chrisanne Brennan, admitted he hadn't taken responsibility, built a real relationship with Lisa, changed her name legally to Brennan Jobs.
What prompted that change?
His sister, Mona Simpson, apparently. He found his birth mother, Joanne, after his adoptive mother, Clara, died. Then he met Mona, his biological sister. They became very close. It seemed to open him up.
And he met Lorraine Powell.
At Stanford in 89. Married in 91, Buddhist ceremony, had 3 kids, Reed, Aaron, Eve. Built a family, it grounded him.
So by 97, Jobs has gone through NextT, Pixar, found family, reconciled pasts, while Apple is collapsing.
Utterly collapsing. That $1 billion loss, the confusing products, Power Macs, Performance, Quadra, Centris, dozens of models. Nobody knew what to buy.
And Scully's mistakes really came home to roost, focusing on profit over product.
Treating Apple like Pepsi, not a tech innovator, raising prices, creating that product graveyard, the Newton, the Pippin, just bad decisions driven by the wrong priorities.
The stage was set for the return. Apple buys NextT in late 96, finalized Feb 97, for $427 million.
And Jobs comes back, initially as interim CEO, ICEO.
And his first move is legendary. Walks in, kills 70% of the products.
Just like that. Draws the 2x2 grid. Consumer desktop, pro desktop, consumer laptop, pro laptop. 4 products. Done.
Instant clarity, focus, simplicity.
Exactly. And it worked. They went from that billion-dollar loss to profit in 1 year. It was stunning.
He also made that deal with Microsoft, $150 million investment.
Wild, right? Selling stock to the enemy. But it gave Apple cash and made IE the default browser on Mac for a while. It also helped Microsoft look less like a monopoly. Smart move, strategically.
Then he rallied the troops, told them the products sucked. No sex in them anymore.
He needed to reignite Apple's soul. And the Think Different campaign did just that. Celebrating the rebels, the misfits. Apple was back to being counterculture.
The first physical proof, the iMac in '98.
That colorful, translucent, all-in-one machine. It looked like nothing else. A huge hit, sold 1 million a year, bought Apple breathing room, showed design was back.
Then came the iPod in 2001. Music was chaotic than Napster.
MP3 players existed, but they were terrible. Bad UI, low capacity, slow transfers. Jobs saw the mess and said, Apple can do better.
And that crazy 9/11 story, the prototypes almost didn't make it.
Landed just before the airspace shut down. Incredible timing. Launched November 2001. 1,000 songs in your pocket. Changed everything.
Sold over 300 million units eventually. Made Apple a consumer electronics giant.
And led to the iTunes Music Store in 2003. 99 cents a song. Legal. Easy. Sold 1 million songs the first week. Jobs basically dragged the music industry into the digital age. Wynton Marsalis called him a man possessed.
But the biggest leap was yet to come. 2007. The iPhone.
Revolutionary and magical. 5 years ahead, he claimed. Phone, iPod, internet communicator, all in one.
And the key. No physical keyboard. Multi-touch.
A complete rebuke of existing smartphones.
Yeah.
Pinch to zoom, scrolling. It felt like magic. Applying computer interface ideas to a phone. Genius.
The launch was insane. Lines everywhere. Sold 250,000 the first day.
The entire industry had to start over. It defined the modern smartphone. Over 2.3 billion sold since. Just staggering.
Then the iPad in 2010, conceived even earlier, apparently.
Yeah, shelved for the iPhone.
Yeah.
Simplicity, portability. Jobs thought it could usher in the post-PC era. Called it the most important thing he'd done.
But the tech critics were harsh at first. Giant iPod touch.
Yeah, worthless. No USB. Jobs was apparently bummed out by the initial reaction.
Well-
But the public, they loved it.
Sold faster than the iPhone initially. Fastest selling consumer product ever at the time. Over 500 million sold.
And underlying all this was the ecosystem strategy. Hardware, software, services, all integrated.
Right. Refusing to license the OS. Keeping it all tightly controlled for that seamless experience. iCloud in 2011 was part of that.
Moving your digital hub to the cloud. Demoting the PC. It was all part of the grand vision.
And the financial results were just unbelievable, overtaking Dell in 2006.
Prompting that classic Jobs email, Michael Dell wasn't perfect at predicting the future. Became the world's most valuable company. Revenue grew 15 times between 97 and 2011.
Plus the Disney Pixar deal in 2006 made him Disney's largest shareholder. His influence spread far beyond Apple.
An incredible decade of innovation and growth. But his health was starting to become a major issue.
Diagnosed with that rare pancreatic cancer back in 2003.
And he delayed conventional treatment for 9 months, trying alternative therapies. A decision many believe cost him valuable time, something he reportedly regretted later.
He still has some amazing moments, though. That 2005 Stanford speech, stay hungry, stay foolish.
So powerful. Reflecting on failure, purpose, connecting the dots, looking backward. A must-watch.
He oversaw the Intel transition for Macs, took medical leave in 2009, got a liver transplant. Tim Cook stepped in.
Jobs refused part of Cook's liver, which Cook offered. Shows you their relationship. He returned part-time.
His last keynotes, unveiling the iPad, then iCloud in June 2011. Visibly frail, but still passionate.
He resigned as CEO in August 2011. That day has come, he wrote. Became chairman, named Cook's successor, kept working intensely right up to the end.
He passed away October 5, 2011, age 56.
His sister Mona said his final words were just, oh wow,
Yeah.
repeated 3 times. Makes you wonder what he saw.
Many thought Apple would falter without him, but they didn't.
Because his real gift wasn't just the products, it was the philosophy he embedded back into Apple's DNA.
Yeah.
That relentless focus on excellence, design, user experience.
And he told Cook specifically, never ask what I would do, just do what's right.
Trusting the culture he'd rebuilt. And Cook has led Apple to even greater heights, financially. The philosophy endures.
So what a journey. Rebel kid, spiritual seeker, failed founder, comeback king. One of the most dramatic stories in business history.
Absolutely. It's about vision, intuition, learning from massive failures like NextT, and that absolute unwavering commitment to making insanely great products. How personal life and professional drive intertwine.
It really shows how experiences, even the tough ones, shape everything.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening. Think about your own life, your own experiences, maybe the ones that seem unrelated or even like failures.
If you connect those dots looking backward, like Jobs advised, what surprising path might they reveal? What hidden passion could be waiting?
And how might that help you make your own dent in the universe?